On the night of October 9, 2016, Houston police rushed toward an apartment complex off East Houston Road after neighbors reported gunfire tearing through a cramped Fifth Ward breezeway. When officers arrived, Adoniya Spiller was lying wounded on the concrete after bullets ripped through his neck and stomach, while two little girls stood only feet away from the shooting. Witnesses kept repeating the same strange detail afterward, saying Marcus Coleman told Spiller to put the baby down moments before firing. By the next day, Spiller was dead, while Marcus had already vanished from Houston, heading east toward Louisiana. That was Marcus Coleman when everything collapsed. Before that night, the story looked very different. Origin. Before that breezeway turned bloody, Marcus Renard Coleman and Adoniya Spiller came from the same hot pocket of Houston called the Fifth Ward, a place locals knew as the Nickel. Around Lyons Avenue, Jensen Drive, Kelly Court, Coke Street, Market Street, the neighborhood carried old names like the Bloody Fifth and Blood Alley. Those names were not just street talk, since residents grew up around sirens, boarded houses, corner stores, robberies, toxic land, poverty, crews, funerals, plus families trying to survive the same blocks. The Union Pacific rail yard contamination later became another kind of danger, with cancer fears hanging over Kashmere Gardens and Fifth Ward homes. So when kids grew up there, they were not just learning streets, they were learning pressure from every direction. Marcus came up in that world, while Fifth Ward Circle had weight around the neighborhood, moving through smaller crews like Market Street Money Gang, Brewster Park Bitch Killers, Coke Street, 2CCs, and Back Street. Their thing was not only standing outside looking tough, since police tied affiliates to pharmacy burglaries, ATM hits, jugging crews, and robberies crossing from Texas into Louisiana. In 2014, men linked to the Fifth Ward Circle got arrested in Lake Charles after pharmacy break-ins, while later ATM cases showed how crews could move quickly, hit hard, then slide back toward Houston. That kind of motion shaped young dudes watching older heads make fast money, dodge cases, and still come home talking big. Marcus was growing near that rhythm, and little by little, the block started pulling him deeper. Adoniya Spiller came from the same pressure, but people remembered him more as a young father trying to stay connected to normal life. He and Marcus were childhood friends, the kind who knew each other before court dates, warrants, jail calls, and street reputations complicated everything. They had walked similar streets, passed the same graffiti, heard the same old stories about who got robbed, who got booked, who never made it back home. Around them, Fifth Ward had other examples too, like the Ghetto Boys turning neighborhood pain into music, while Xavier and Howard used football to escape the same box. Even that escape had shadows, since Howard's sister, Ashley, later caught a murder conviction after a fatal crash during a shoplifting chase. By his early 20s, Marcus was no longer just a local face from the neighborhood, since law enforcement had him documented as Fifth Ward Circle. His record carried guns, drugs, violence, and domestic complaints, which meant every police light could feel like trouble coming straight at him. He already had a felon in possession of a firearm charge pending before Adoniya ever hit the ground. That mattered, since a convicted felon with a gun in Texas was already playing with prison time before the murder case arrived. By late 2016, Marcus was not moving relaxed anymore. He was moving like somebody expecting his name to come through a radio call. The setup. The trouble tightened when Marcus believed police wanted him for a domestic violence incident involving his girlfriend. Whether the warrant had fully landed or not, Marcus believed it was real, so that belief started controlling his movements. He bounced around Houston, slept wherever people would let him, checked windows, watched parking lots, and carried himself as every hallway could turn into an arrest scene. When someone already has felony pressure on his back, paranoia does not need much fuel before it starts making regular moments feel dangerous. That was the state Marcus was in when he reached out to Adoniya Spiller. Adoniya opened his apartment to him, which tells you plenty about the friendship before everything went wrong. Marcus did not just show up alone, since he had his newborn daughter with him, which made the situation heavier than a regular street shelter. Adoniya let him stay anyway, trusting old history more than the warning signs sitting right in front of him. They were not strangers, linking up for convenience. They were childhood friends from the same Fifth Ward maze. For Adoniya, giving Marcus a place to lay low probably felt like helping a brother breathe for a minute. Inside that apartment, the days had a strange mix of fatherhood, fear, and street tension sitting in the same room. The two young dads smoked weed, watched television, played games, watched their children, and then tried to act like the pressure outside was not closing in. Still, small things started carrying extra weights like space, money, pride, legal stress, and who felt disrespected inside whose home. Around the neighborhood, people later whispered different versions, including unpaid debts, jealousy, relationship tension, and deeper problems nobody could fully prove. Those rumors mattered only in one way, since they showed how people sensed there was more under the surface than marijuana. Outside the apartment, Fifth Ward kept moving like nothing was paused for Marcus Coleman's problems. Crews tied to the Fifth Ward circle were still making noise through jugging stories, ATM robberies, pharmacy hits, and interstate police chases. Houston officers were dealing with repeat offenders, while courts struggled with bond decisions that kept sending dangerous people back outside. Marcus knew that world well, where dudes caught charges, posted money, missed dates, ran again, then bragged like beating the system was part of the hustle. That mindset followed him into Adoniya's apartment, where hiding started turning into pressure. By the night of October 9th, 2016, that pressure finally found a small doorway into violence. The argument was reportedly over a small amount of marijuana, though by then the weed was probably just the spark touching everything already built up. Adoniya was in the breezeway with children nearby. Marcus was still carrying fear from the law, and neither man backed down quickly enough. What began like another tense exchange between friends suddenly shifted into a moment that witnesses would repeat in court years later. Marcus told Adoniya to put the baby down, and that line turned an argument into the beginning of a murder case. The murder. The argument inside the East Houston Road apartment complex kept getting louder as October 9th, 2016 moved deeper into the night, while neighbors nearby started hearing movement outside the unit. Marcus Coleman had already spent days carrying stress from domestic violence problems, police pressure, pending felony charges, and whatever else was building inside his head during that period. Adoniya Spiller was still trying to calm things down while holding Marcus's newborn daughter, though his own 2-year-old little girl stayed only a few feet away, eye-watching adults argue. Witnesses later described yelling in the breezeway, along with footsteps scraping concrete, while the confrontation kept getting more heated. At some point, the disagreement stopped sounding like regular frustration between friends and started sounding like somebody preparing to cross a line nobody could pull back from afterward. People around Fifth Ward later kept replaying one detail from that night more than anything else, mostly because the line sounded strange, even before jurors heard it years later in court. Marcus looked at Adoniya while the baby was still in his arms, then told him to put the baby down before violence fully erupted outside the apartment. That statement mattered during the murder trial because prosecutors argued the words showed Marcus understood exactly what he was preparing to do next. The twisted part came from how he seemed concerned about moving the infant away from danger while still raising the situation toward deadly force seconds later. Those few words became one of the clearest moments tying together fear, rage, panic, pride, and the warped logic moving through that breezeway. After the command left his mouth, Marcus pulled a handgun while the argument kept spiraling instead of slowing down. Witnesses later described gunfire exploding through the apartment walkway after shots struck Adoniya in the neck and stomach at close range. The breezeway instantly shifted from yelling to screaming while nearby residents rushed toward the doors, trying to understand what had just happened outside. Adoniya collapsed badly wounded, while both children remained frighteningly close to the shooting scene during those first chaotic moments. Neighbors started pouring outside after hearing the blast echo through the complex, while some people ducked behind cars expecting more bullets to follow. Others ran towards Spiller, attempting to stop bleeding before emergency responders reached East Houston Road. Paramedics transported Adoniya Spiller to Ben Taub General Hospital, the same Houston trauma center that regularly handles some of the city's worst shootings, crashes, and violent assaults. Doctors worked through the night trying to stabilize wounds to his neck and abdomen, while relatives slowly started learning what happened inside that Fifth Ward breezeway. By the following day, Adoniya was dead at only 24 years old, leaving behind his daughter, his family, and people who still viewed Marcus Coleman like extended family before everything collapsed. The shooting quickly transformed from an aggravated assault into a murder investigation once hospital staff confirmed Spiller did not survive his injuries. While doctors were still fighting to save him, Marcus was already focused on escape. Instead of staying behind with either child or waiting for the police, Marcus fled Houston immediately after the shooting ended. He left behind his newborn daughter, left Adoniya's little girl standing near the aftermath, abandoned the apartment, and then disappeared before investigators fully secured the case. For Spiller's family, the betrayal hit almost harder than the shooting itself because Marcus had not been some random enemy sliding through Fifth Ward looking for trouble. This was a childhood friend who had received shelter, trust, food, space, plus protection from police pressure only days earlier. Around Houston, another killing started blending into a wider pattern already haunting neighborhoods, where robberies, shootings, retaliation, and gang conflicts never really stopped moving. That nonstop violence already had Fifth Ward residents exhausted before Adoniya died inside that breezeway. Earlier in 2016, Carol Oliver, a respected McDonald's owner known for helping ex-convicts find jobs, was killed outside his East Freeway restaurant during a robbery attempt involving armed suspects. Oliver had spent years feeding homeless residents and supporting struggling families, though he still ended up dying in a parking lot after gunfire erupted beside his own business. Stories like that stayed fresh in Houston, while random shootings, ATM robberies, pharmacy burglaries, plus retaliation culture kept feeding fear across different neighborhoods. For many residents, Adoniya's murder became another reminder, showing how quickly regular situations turn deadly once pride, guns, or street pressure entered the room. By the time Houston Police Department investigators officially identified Marcus Coleman as the suspect, he was already moving toward Louisiana while the city barely understood how fast the situation was unraveling. HPD homicide investigators, Sergeant J. Brooks and Sergeant C. Segielski, immediately started piecing together witness statements, shell casings, timelines, and the relationships tying Marcus to Adoniya before the shooting. Detectives quickly learned the suspect was not some unknown gunman, since Marcus Coleman already had a criminal history, pending firearm charges, gang connections, and multiple people identifying him. The murder charge officially replaced aggravated assault once Spiller died, though by then, Marcus had already crossed state lines, moving east through the routes commonly used by Houston street crews. Interstate 10 had long connected Houston fugitives with Louisiana hideouts, especially for people carrying gang ties, robbery connections, or relatives willing to keep them hidden temporarily. So while Fifth Ward residents were still processing another funeral, Marcus Coleman was already becoming a fugitive. Escape and fugitive life. Marcus fled toward Louisiana through Interstate 10 corridors that Houston crews had used for years during robberies, narcotics movement, and hiding from warrants. He bounced between apartments, relatives, associates, and temporary safe houses while law enforcement in Texas kept building the murder case behind him. Louisiana made sense for somebody from Fifth Ward because Houston connections already stretched through Beaumont, Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans. Crews tied to the Fifth Ward Circle had already appeared in Louisiana pharmacy burglary investigations years earlier, so Marcus understood how easy it could feel blending into those same networks. While Adoniya's family prepared for burial arrangements back home, Marcus was already trying to stay invisible across state lines. Back inside Fifth Ward, rumors started spreading almost immediately once people realized Marcus had disappeared after the shooting. Some residents claimed he stayed involved in robberies while hiding around Louisiana, though others whispered about strip clubs, more hustling, and another child somewhere outside Houston. None of those stories ever fully became part of court records, though that hardly mattered once neighborhood gossip grabbed hold of somebody running from murder charges. Fugitive stories usually grow larger each week. Somebody stays missing, especially when the person already carried gang ties and street reputation before disappearing. Around Market Street, Coke Street, and Lyons Avenue, people talked about Marcus like somebody moving through shadows while Houston police kept trying to catch up. Authorities eventually tracked him down, extradited him back into Harris County, and then formally pushed forward with the murder case tied to Adoniya Spiller's death. What frustrated many residents came afterward, since Marcus still managed to receive a bond despite already fleeing once before prosecutors fully secured him. Community anger slowly started building once people realized the man accused of killing his childhood friend was walking outside again. Families across Houston had already complained for years about violent offenders repeatedly bonding out before trials finally arrived. Marcus Coleman's situation started looking exactly like those earlier cases residents constantly argued about around barbershops, apartment courtyards, and courthouse hallways. After release, Marcus repeatedly slipped away from court supervision while the case dragged deeper into delays. Prosecutors later described him jumping bail multiple times, missing court appearances, cutting off ankle monitoring, catching new domestic violence allegations, and later picking up cocaine possession charges too. Every time authorities rearrested him, another release seemed to follow shortly afterward, while the murder trial kept getting pushed farther away. Around the same years, Houston investigators were still chasing Fifth Ward Circle robbery crews tied to ATM thefts, drugging operations, pharmacy burglaries, plus interstate conspiracies, as eventually drawing federal indictments. 27 people connected to Market Street Money Gang later faced accusations tied to ATM robbery operations stretching across several states. That larger pattern mattered because Marcus was not operating inside some isolated story, since Houston already had repeat offenders constantly cycling through the same overloaded system. While Marcus kept disappearing, then resurfacing through arrest warrants and bond violations, prosecutors slowly realized the case was turning into a years-long mess. Hurricane Harvey flooded Houston in 2017, and then COVID later froze large sections of the court system while murder dockets kept stacking higher. Every delay meant Adoniya Spiller's family stayed trapped inside the same unfinished grief while Marcus continued receiving more time outside jail walls. Meanwhile, Spiller's daughter kept growing older without her father, while the man accused of killing him repeatedly returned to the streets. By the time prosecutors finally stabilized the case, nearly 7 years had disappeared after that breezeway shooting changed multiple families forever. The long road to justice. As months kept passing after the October 2016 killing, the case slowly became trapped inside a collapsing court schedule that never seemed fully stable again. Hurricane Harvey slammed Houston in August 2017, flooding neighborhoods, shutting down court operations, destroying records, delaying hearings, plus throwing Harris County dockets into chaos for months. Before prosecutors could fully regain momentum, COVID arrived years later and froze major sections of the Texas court system again, while murder cases stacked higher across Houston. Each delay stretched the Spiller case further away from the night Adoniya died in that East Houston Road breezeway. What originally looked like a straightforward homicide investigation slowly turned into a 7-year grind involving missed appearances, rescheduled hearings, bond violations, and repeated rearrests. For Adoniya Spiller's family, time started feeling cruel in a different way while Marcus Coleman kept drifting through the legal system. His daughter had only been 2 years old when she stood near the aftermath of the shooting, though by the time trial preparations became serious, she was already approaching school age. Relatives repeatedly prepared themselves for hearings that never happened after delays kept reshaping the schedule every few months. Early outrage slowly turned into emotional exhaustion while the family kept reliving the same murder without getting real closure. Assistant District Attorney Barbara Musay later described the situation as almost like watching someone refuse every opportunity to stop destroying his own life. That frustration only grew stronger whenever Marcus picked up another arrest while already charged with murdering his childhood friend. Instead of lying low after extradition, Marcus continued violating conditions tied to his release while prosecutors kept documenting new incidents connected to violence and drugs. He missed more court appearances, disappeared repeatedly, caught more domestic violence accusations, then later picked up cocaine possession charges while the murder case remained unresolved. Prosecutor Jacob Salinas later explained how every new felony charge complicated scheduling further, creating more paperwork, hearings, warrants, plus delays surrounding the original murder trial. Bond amounts eventually climbed so high that Harris County finally held Marcus in custody instead of sending him back outside again. By that stage, prosecutors believed the pattern clearly showed somebody unwilling to change direction, no matter how many chances the system offered him. Around Houston, many residents were already seeing his case as another example of dangerous offenders repeatedly finding ways back onto the streets. The bond controversy surrounding Harris County kept growing during those same years while families connected to violent crimes increasingly felt abandoned by the system supposed to protect them. Critics argued that defendants facing serious accusations could still secure release through bondsmen, charging small percentages while victims waited years for justice. Marcus Coleman's case became especially frustrating for many residents because prosecutors argued he fled, reoffended, violated supervision, and still kept finding routes back outside. Around Houston, other stories involving repeat offenders, ATM robbery crews, violent gangs, plus interstate criminals fed the same anger surrounding delayed accountability. Men tied to Fifth Ward Circle and Market Street Money Gang were already appearing in robbery investigations stretching from Houston into Louisiana and other states. For families watching those headlines stack together, Adoniya Spiller's murder no longer felt isolated from the wider violence exhausting the city. Meanwhile, Fifth Ward itself kept changing while the case dragged toward trial year after year. Community redevelopment projects started pushing new parks, businesses, health centers, and housing developments around Lyons Avenue, while activists fought environmental contamination tied to the old Union Pacific site. Residents attended meetings discussing cancer clusters affecting families across Fifth Ward and Kashmir Gardens, while documentaries like Fifth Ward Exposed pushed attention toward long-ignored health dangers. Yet, while community groups tried rebuilding parts of the neighborhood, shootings, robberies, gang investigations, and violent arrests still kept surfacing around Houston. Stories involving Carol Oliver, ATM robbery crews, pharmacy burglaries, plus Fifth Ward Circle indictments continued feeding the same atmosphere Marcus and Adoniya grew up inside years earlier. By 2023, almost 7 years after the murder, the case was finally heading toward trial, while Marcus Coleman approached 30 years old and witnesses prepared to relive the breezeway shooting once again. Trial and conviction. The murder trial finally began during April 2023 inside a Harris County courtroom after years of delays, warrants, bond violations, weather disasters, plus pandemic shutdowns kept dragging the case forward slowly. Prosecutors laid out a timeline beginning with Marcus hiding inside Adoniya Spiller's apartment during October 2016 while already carrying domestic violence problems and firearm charges. From there, they walked the jurors through the argument, the shooting, the Louisiana escape, repeated bail jumping, additional arrests, and the long stretch separating the murder from the courtroom. Assistant District Attorneys Jacob Salinas and Barbara Mousse presented the case as a pattern instead of one isolated mistake made during a heated argument. Their strategy focused heavily on showing Marcus repeatedly returning to violence after nearly every chance the legal system gave him. Witness testimony quickly brought jurors back into the cramped apartment breezeway where the confrontation first exploded. People described hearing yelling outside the East Houston Road apartment before Marcus became more aggressive during the dispute involving marijuana and disrespect. Jurors repeatedly heard about children standing nearby while Adoniya held Marcus Coleman's newborn daughter moments before gunfire erupted. The line telling Spiller to put the baby down became central during testimony because prosecutors argued those words revealed awareness before the shooting happened. Medical testimony later explained how bullets struck Adoniya in the neck and abdomen before he collapsed in front of nearby residents attempting to help. Prosecutors used those details carefully, building the image of a frightened but escalating confrontation turning deadly within seconds. The state also introduced Marcus as a documented member of Fifth Ward Circle while outlining earlier gun charges, assault accusations, domestic violence incidents, plus criminal history surrounding the murder timeline. Prosecutors wanted jurors viewing the shooting as part of a larger pattern involving instability, violence, and repeated disregard for consequences. Around those same years, Houston residents had already watched stories involving Market Street money gang, ATM robberies, interstate burglary crews, and repeat offenders dominate local headlines. Jurors were hearing this murder case inside a city already exhausted by gang investigations, bond controversies, shootings, and violent suspects repeatedly cycling through release conditions. That broader atmosphere mattered during trial because prosecutors framed Marcus not as somebody destroyed by one bad night, but as somebody repeatedly escalating despite intervention after intervention. Every rearrest after Adoniya's death strengthened that narrative further inside the courtroom. Defense attorneys attempted pushing a different version by suggesting Marcus feared Adoniya during the confrontation and reacted under pressure inside the apartment breezeway. They implied Spiller may have reached for a weapon or threatened Marcus during the argument before shots were fired. Prosecutors attacked those claims aggressively while reminding jurors about the witness testimony, the children nearby, the escape afterward, and the years Marcus spent dodging court supervision. By deliberation time, the jury appeared unconvinced that fear explained the shooting or everything that followed afterward. When the guilty verdict finally arrived, emotional reactions spread quietly through the courtroom while Adoniya Spiller's relatives processed the end of a case lasting nearly 7 years. Marcus remained mostly silent after conviction, though the verdict finally closed the mystery surrounding who killed Adoniya Spiller inside that Fifth Ward breezeway. What the conviction could not undo was the permanent damage left behind after one argument between childhood friends turned into murder. Sentencing and downfall. When Marcus Coleman returned to Harris County Court for sentencing during April 2023, nearly 7 years had already passed after Adoniya Spiller died inside that Fifth Ward breezeway. Spiller's family entered the courtroom carrying years of anger, exhaustion, funeral memories, delayed hearings, plus the weight of watching Marcus repeatedly walk free while the case dragged forward. During victim impact statements, relatives described Adoniya as a loyal friend, a father trying to raise his daughter properly, and somebody who opened his apartment to Marcus during a dangerous period. His mother spoke directly toward Marcus while explaining how the family treated him like extended family long before the shooting destroyed everything between them. That emotional tension sat heavily inside the courtroom because the murder never started from strangers, rival crews, or some random street ambush involving unknown shooters. Prosecutors Jacob Salinas and Barbara Mousse focused heavily on the years following the murder while summarizing Marcus Coleman's repeated chances to change direction after October 2016. They reminded the court about domestic violence accusations, bail jumping, cocaine possession charges, missed appearances, ankle monitor violations, plus multiple arrests occurring while Adoniya's family waited for trial. Salinas explained how Hurricane Harvey, COVID shutdowns, and repeated rearrests stretched the murder case into a years-long process that few families should ever experience. Mousse argued Marcus kept returning to violence whenever the system released him, making the case bigger than one argument over marijuana inside an apartment complex. Around Houston, stories involving ATM robbery crews, Market Street money gang indictments, pharmacy burglaries, and repeat offenders cycling through bond had already exhausted many residents long before this sentencing arrived. The court ultimately sentenced Marcus Coleman to 45 years inside the Texas prison system after he waived appeal rights as part of the agreement surrounding the case. That sentence meant he would need to serve at least half before becoming eligible for parole, placing his first realistic release opportunity somewhere deep into middle age. By then, the same 24-year-old fugitive sprinting toward Louisiana after the shooting had become a 30-year-old convicted murderer heading into state custody. The years disappeared fast between the breezeway gunfire and final sentencing, though the consequences kept expanding for everyone connected to the case. Adoniya Spiller had already been buried years earlier. Marcus Coleman was finally locked away, yet the same Fifth Ward streets shaping both men still stood exactly where they always had: legacy and reflection. Long after the courtroom emptied, the people left carrying this story forward were mostly the children standing closest to the damage. Adoniya Spiller's daughter grew up after witnessing the aftermath surrounding her father's murder, while Marcus Coleman's children faced adulthood with their father sitting inside prison. Around Fifth Ward, life kept moving through community gardens, redevelopment projects, cancer investigations tied to the Union Pacific contamination site, and activism connected to the Fifth Ward exposed documentary. At the same time, Houston still dealt with shootings, ATM robbery crews, gang investigations, plus stories like Carol Oliver's murder continued to haunt local memory. Some residents escaped through football, like Xavier and Howard, while others stayed trapped inside the same cycles, swallowing generations before them. What happened between Marcus Coleman and Adoniya Spiller finally came down to one small apartment breezeway inside Houston's Fifth Ward during October 2016. One childhood friend was hiding from police pressure, while another friend tried helping him survive a rough moment temporarily. A simple argument turned deadly within seconds once fear, pride, violence, and pressure collided inside the same narrow space. Fifth Ward keeps producing survivors, hustlers, artists, athletes, fugitives, victims, and killers, all from the same neighborhoods, sometimes from the same classrooms, occasionally from the same friend groups.